Number 10. Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra is one of the most well-known names when it comes to ancient queens and kings of Egypt, but did you know that Cleopatra we're seeing referenced in numerous film adaptations was actually the 7th Cleopatra, not the 1st or 2nd or 3rd or 4th. 7th. Egypt's last active pharaoh, born in 69 BC, was the 3rd child to Ptolemy XII. The Ptolemaic dynasty, the Macedonian Greek royal family, originally had its ties to Alexander the Great, so they were ruling Egypt for a long time. Male rulers took the name Ptolemy and queens were, well, Cleopatra. Her lineage runs deep in the heart of Egypt, but Cleopatra, fun fact, was, number 9, not Egyptian. Sure, she may have been born in Egypt, but Cleopatra, despite what many believe, was not. She was the last Greek ruler of Egypt, and after Alexander the Great's death in 323 BCE, Ptolemy then took over Egypt, which in turn launched this wave, this dynasty of Greek rulers lasting for centuries. DNA-wise, she was barely Egyptian, but as she grew up, she was determined to learn Egyptian ways, and due to political structure, she started to style herself as the goddess Isis. She was the first Cleopatra that claimed to be Isis after the 3rd Cleopatra. Yeah, there's a lot more Cleopatras than you thought. Number 8. Family problems. When Ptolemy VII died back in 51 BC, naturally the throne was passed down to his son, Ptolemy VIII, and of course Cleopatra VII. So both children were assigned to the throne, Cleopatra only being 18 and her brother being 10 years old. So Cleopatra became the main bread and butter. She was the ruler, and in typical ancient fashion, the two had to get married. You gotta keep it in the family. A couple years passed, and with Cleopatra trying to run the show, little brother wasn't having it. Or rather, her husband and co-ruler wasn't having it. Eventually, Cleopatra was pushed out of Alexandria, and her greed for power over her little brother, equally a co-ruler, had her completely driven out. But don't fret, she's coming back to Alexandria soon, and she's got a really cool idea of how to sneak back in the front doors with her new man, but I'll get to that later on. Number 7. Love and power. It's often thought that Cleopatra just married her brothers, more than one, got power, and then charmed Caesar and Mark Antony and then Bob's your uncle. Well, she wasn't really down for any of this. She didn't seek this lifestyle out per se, nor did her 10-year-old brother. I'm sure it wasn't ideal to be that stressed out when you're that young. I got a flat bike tire at 10. I didn't get Egypt. Know what I mean? Cleopatra once said, as the goddess Isis, the most Egyptian of gods, married her brother Osiris, so in the process of becoming Egyptian, that is, becoming the ruling house of Egypt, although by lineage we were pure Macedonian Greek, we Ptolemies adopted some ancient Egyptian customs that others found shocking. One was brother-sister marriage, as the pharaohs had done earlier. Thus my mother and father were actually half-siblings, and I was forced in turn to marry my brothers, although it was a marriage in form only. Her relationship had true political advantage, but the way she felt about Julius Caesar was true. He had truly earned her love, not just lust. Not only would I never harm him, but I would kill anyone who tried to. Damn, ride or die. Nobody prepared me to feel so fiercely loyal to him and so instantly bound. Number 6. Julius Caesar. Nicknamed the Bald's Adulterer, which is now my new favorite diss ever, Julius Caesar had a history of his own, and his, rather than family and power, was lust. He was known to hook up with tons of people and to get them to fall in love with him just so he could use their power. So of course the two crossed paths. In October 50 BCE, Cleopatra had been kicked out pretty much of the family, so she fled to Syria, but she kept busy. She established an army and returned 2 years later to face her brother. At the same time now, the Roman general Pompey was taken out, plus the arrival of one Julius Adulterer Bald Caesar. The air was calm, it was peaceful for a hot minute, and Cleopatra knew that during this time she needed all the support she could get, specifically now from the Romans. At the same time, Caesar was looking to collect debts from Cleopatra's father, so they both felt the need for each other in some way. It was a match made in heaven. Number 5. Sneaking back in. The pair became lovers, and it may have been love at first sight. Remember Caesar's really cool nickname? Well, Cleopatra had some wild methods herself. You know, believing she was the goddess Isis, she tried to appear as the goddess on the regular, so she was committed. She made these dazzling entrances whenever she could, but in 48 BC, right when Caesar arrived in Alexandria, during that family feud with Ptolemy VIII, she wanted to meet the Roman general, but she didn't want to be seen. That would cause some drama. So she had herself wrapped up in a linen sack and then personally delivered to Caesar's bedroom, and then unraveled, and out comes boop, boop, Cleopatra. She won the heart of Rome's future dictator, and eventually she regained Egypt's throne. Nice. Her brother wasn't too fond of this alliance, of course, and in the following battle, Ptolemy drowned in the Nile, resulting in Cleopatra's true return to power. Number 4. watch the throne. Now this sounds like they would rule the world together, or they should have, but Egyptian tradition already set her love life in stone. She had to marry her other brother, Ptolemy you guessed it, 9th. Caesar was already married, but that didn't really matter for the bald adulterer now, did it? Cleopatra and Julius did have a child, and following Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, Cleopatra had her brother, husband, and co-ruler killed. She's just taken out all of her family. This is crazy. But she did so to ensure that her own son, with Caesar, appropriately named Caesarion, would be the next in line for power. Her sister as well, she had a hand in her execution, Arsinoe. Doesn't matter if you're family or not, if you're a threat to her throne, you're getting diced. Number 3, Caesar and Mark Antony. We need to dive into detail about Caesar's death and what happened with Mark Antony. So when Cleopatra originally took Caesar's hand in 46 BC, it wasn't exactly chill. Caesar was very vocal about the fact that Cleopatra was his other lady, his other boo, and at one point Cleopatra and their son, Caesarion, came to visit him in the city, and he was pumped. He had the statue for her built right in the temple of the Venus Genetrix, and Romans were obviously upset, to say the least. They ended up stabbing Caesar to death in the Roman Senate in 44 BC, so just a couple of years after that. Her time with Caesar had long-term effects on the Romans, so women started to dress like her. So much so that now we're misidentifying Cleopatra's body many times over and over again because of this exact reason. Later in 41 BC, she met Mark Antony, and again, she made a dazzling entrance. She arrived on a golden barge equipped with oars made of pure silver and massive purple sails. You would see her coming. She was emulating a different goddess. This time around, she was going for the Aphrodite look, with attendants dressed up as Cupid fanning her down. So extra, what a diva. Well, not really a diva, rather what a planner. Because Mark considered himself the embodiment of the Greek god Dionysus. 41 BC, their love life had now ignited, and again, she was being used for her riches, and he was being used to protect her crown. They lived a comfortable life full of lust and leisure for a bit. They actually made their own club, a drinking club named the Inimitable Livers. This was from 41 to 40 BC, and members of the club would partake in all these feasts and games, just wine everywhere, and after a few drinks, Cleopatra and Antony would disguise themselves and then go into the streets of Alexandria and prank locals. That's like when James Corden does the crosswalk musical thing, only I'd definitely rather watch these two. Number 2, her death. In 30 BC, Cleopatra and Antony took their own lives. This happened right after Octavian forces followed them to Alexandria. Now, one of the biggest questions to this day is just how Cleopatra herself met her fate. Now, it's been rumored for a while that a snake bite was the culprit. Cleopatra apparently allowed a poisonous snake to end her life, or was it something entirely different? Was she ahead of the game here too? Instead of a bite from an asp, Greek and Roman historians believe that she did even more here. It's theorized that she poisoned herself using toxins, and she herself administered the poison using a hairpin. So Antony fell onto his own sword, and Cleopatra poked herself with poison. Even the way these historical figures went out aligns with their personality and leadership. Because like I said off the top, Cleopatra was brilliant, specifically in chemistry. Nobody really knows, but this theory of her poisoning herself definitely checks out. But where's the body? Number 1, her tomb. So her death is one thing, but cut to today, we're preserving as much as we can about ancient Egyptians. We're trying to learn more. Ramses II literally got a legal passport thousands of years after he died because officials felt bad marking the mummy as luggage. We're literally digging up the past to find her tomb now. The last queen of Egypt has been lost for over 2,000 years, and we might be getting close to finding her, maybe. There's a site called Taposiris Magna. It's about 30 miles west of Alexandria, and for about 15 years now, excavation teams have been carefully finding remains that date back to that time, that go back to 30 BC. They found coins that were created during her ruling, so we're getting close. There's of course many who believe we're not getting close at all and that we'll never find her. And they're party poopers, but they also may have a valid theory. Many scholars believe the queen was buried inside Alexandria, but that many years ago, it's possible she's now underwater. Due to coastal erosion, there's a section of Cleopatra's palace that is now underwater, so it really is up to chance. Kicking off the list at number 10, got a passport. Ramses II is known as one of the greatest ancient Egyptian rulers of all time. He was called Ramses the Great, so that's a good sign already. At a young age, he fought in harsh battles to protect the borders of Egypt, and during his reign, the Egyptian army reached 100,000 men. That's a pretty large army. He was later referred to as the Great Ancestor, and it didn't take long for Ramses II to declare himself a god. It's always fun being like, hey, by the way, I'm a god now. That's how cool I am. 30 years into his ruling, Ramses was ritually turned into an Egyptian god. It was a formal thing. Though it wasn't until 3,000 years later until Ramses would truly soar through the skies. He was buried in his treasure after 96 years of living, and in 1974 he finally started to show signs of aging. Not too bad. He went from being on display to being sent to Paris to get a glow up, to preserve the king's body even longer. Instead of being listed as luggage on the way to Paris, the pharaoh was given an official Egyptian passport for the commute. The government gave a mummy a passport. This is like the first 5 minutes of a horror film. Under occupation, it even said king. And there was even a small disclaimer noting that he was in fact still dead. You can never be too sure, Number 9. Baboon tattoos. Ancient Egyptians worshipped animals. This is common knowledge now at this point. We've heard about their love towards cats, which I'll explain later on, but what about baboons? Yeah, they were pretty important pieces to this ancient puzzle as well. Some mummies were found with tattoos of baboons on their bodies. Now, one of the most strange things that pharaohs did back in ancient Egyptian days was train baboons to make arrests. Imagine stealing a pair for your family and then 4 baboons start doing parkour chasing you down. That's so alarming. I would just throw it and be like, please stop! You're so scary and strong. They trained baboons to pick fruit, they trained them to make beer, and they also trained them to entertain. Yeah, these baboons were the life of the party. Their dance moves alone would be reason enough to tattoo one on my arm. So you know what? I get it. Get a Harambe tattoo. I'm like, I see it. I see the similarities. Number 8. Worship dung beetles. So worshipping a baboon that dances and makes holiday ales, yeah, I can see how one would worship such a creature. That makes sense. But pharaohs also worship dung beetles, and their reasoning may surprise you. Dung beetles, also known as scarabs, are the only species in the entire world that follows the Milky Way naturally. Animals are born with natural instincts. Sea turtles race to the sea. These guys follow the cosmos. It's pretty wild. It's one thing to follow the sun naturally because it gives off warmth. Sunflowers will literally turn their head to find the sun, which is super creepy, but it's beautiful. These insects would follow the line of the Milky Way and then roll their poop towards it. They'd be like, hello Milky Way, and they just... Hieroglyphs of these beetles are seen all over. Like near the sacred lake at the Temple of Karnak, for example, there's a massive scarab monument. And today, if you walk around it 9 times, you get good luck. And don't worry, you don't have to roll any droppings at the same time. Don't get dizzy, that's all, it's the only rule. The scarab is there to represent the god Khepri, which ancient Egyptians believed was the sun. I grew up thinking the sun was a baby, but that's because I watched Teletubbies, so, depends. Number 7, surprise each other. Cleopatra and Julius Caesar were a pretty beneficial couple, to say the least. Cleopatra would use Caesar's armies, which in turn would allow her to rule Egypt, while Caesar was eyeing down Cleopatra's extreme wealth. They were the perfect pair. She was able to financially support Caesar enough for him to return to power back in Rome, but how did such a perfect pair meet in the first place? Did Cleopatra swipe right? No. Well, a then 52-year-old Julius Caesar visited the much younger Cleopatra, so she then sent a surprise gift to his chambers. She got her crew to roll her up in a carpet or bed sheets, it's not really confirmed, something along those lines, and then delivered her to his door completely nude. He unraveled a naked Cleopatra and he's like, okay, hello. That's pretty impressive. Cleopatra was down for fun surprises. While we don't recommend this as an approach ever, it's one worth mentioning on our list. Number 6, gender reveal parties. We've all seen those videos. A guy goes to hit a baseball, he misses it, the baseball breaks and there's pink dust all around his feet and he starts crying. It's wonderful. Gender reveal parties were quite popular, until they started lighting wildfires. But back in the day, Egyptians had a pretty interesting method for predicting the gender of a newborn. Instead of peeing on a pregnancy test, you would have to use wheat and barley seeds instead. Depending on how those barley crops grew, they could accurately predict the sex of the child. They were right 85% of the time, which is quite impressive back in the day. We went from watering crops to burning them. Hashtag, it's a boy. Number 5, space knife. Only a few years after King Tut's tomb was discovered in the Valley of the Kings, archaeologist Howard Carter found 2 daggers that were buried with the king. Now, like I mentioned earlier, it's not uncommon to be buried with your treasure or belongings. It's why ancient Egyptians would build these tombs in a certain way, so grave robbers can't just sneak in after you pass away and then take all of your goodies. So 2 daggers were found with King Tut, one made of iron and the other with gold. Now, with iron being more rare than gold during the Bronze Age, this was quite a big deal. With recent advancements in technology, we're able to use a technique called portable X-ray fluorescent spectrometry, and according to the journal Meteorites and Planetary Science, the blade is actually made of iron, nickel, and cobalt, suggesting that its material is that of extraterrestrial origin. A blade fell from the sky and now a king has it. That's pretty insane. Also, aliens? Just saying. Number 4, KV55. Also located in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, Tomb 55, otherwise known as KV55, was found by Edward Arton back in 1907. It was discovered right next to King Tut's tomb, and the reason that we call this tomb by a number rather than a name is because we really don't know for sure who's inside. Even the walls of the tombs inside, they aren't covered with beautiful hieroglyphs to tip us off on their history or their ruling, it's just bare. The only hint as to who is buried remains on the walls. It's one hieroglyph that remains, and it was discovered also in 1907, and it translates simply to, "The evil one shall not live again." That's very scary. That's definitely scarier than Greg was here. I don't know. Even massive stones were built and set up in order to prevent anything from getting out, whereas usually with ancient tombs it's the opposite, so that's pretty scary. The description for those inside the tomb has also been destroyed, so we have really no idea who's in KV55 or what. Number 3, ancient Photoshop. When we look back at ancient artwork, we see these kings and queens and they look athletic. They look to be in great shape, when in reality, these pharaohs were probably quite obese. I mean, think about it. If you slam wine and bread all day and you have baboons dancing around, plus a little dab of honey every, 8 minutes, yeah, you're gonna gain some weight. Many of these ancient pharaohs had diabetes. And Queen Hatshepsut, who was alive during the 15th century BC, her sarcophagus shows her as slim and strong, but historians all agree that she was out of shape and extremely unhealthy. Honestly, I would do the exact same if I was there back then. She was ahead of her time. If somebody made a statue for me, I'd be like, yeah, give it an 8-pack, make him extremely jacked and 7'2". Can we do that? Sure, no one's gonna ask questions. I'm Dwayne "The Rock" Johnston, just write it down, please. Number 2, worshipped cats. I am allergic to cats, but I still love them. I still pet them. I ruined my entire night just to get my face right there next to their cute little furry face. But ancient Egyptians, like I said earlier, really loved cats. They respected them, they worshipped them. Even though at the time dogs were respected for being hunters, cats were still considered magical creatures. So if there's ever a cat versus dog argument going on your end of the screen, cats win. I'm allergic and I'm still saying cats win. That's huge. If you had a cat, it means you had good luck. When cats passed away, they too were mummified back in the day. You would think that alone was plenty of respect, but ancient Egyptians and pharaohs went a step further. After their cat died, they would shave their eyebrows off and then mourn until they grew back. That's like 3.5 months of cat depression. That's wild. Next time your friend tells you that their cat passed away, tell them that if they really love them, they'll shave their eyebrows off and then see what they say. Also, you don't have to make your friends shave their eyebrows. Let's leave this one in the past. That's fine. Just be sad with eyebrows. Be like, Number 1, fight a hippo. Egypt's first pharaoh, Menes, although we know next to nothing about his history, there is something there that has historians scratching their heads to this day. At his early time, the pharaoh was setting out to unite all of Egypt under his rule. The time that he ruled as well is considered a rather peaceful time when comparing it to years later. We know that he was well respected, and we also know that after his 63 years of peaceful ruling, he was stomped to death by a hippo. That's horrible. It's a horrible way to go out. He was an elderly ruler at that time. He was surrounded by guards, and somehow a hippo got all the way to his chambers. A hippo! And then ended the pharaoh's life. Some suggest that the reason there's nothing written about this pharaoh's tragic, horrible demise is because it's possible that the hippo was his pet. This is why you don't try and tame a beast as a pet. Perhaps this was an early similar situation as the Siegfried and Roy tiger attack. Just stick to smaller magical cats. They're much safer. They won't stomp you to death. Oh my god, it's horrible. Kicking off the list at number 10, new tombs. Fresh off the press, folks, Egypt announced only yesterday. Egypt, they announced it, yeah, just all of them as a whole. Egypt announced only yesterday that they have discovered 5 ancient tombs in Saqqara. This is fresh news, this is brand new, only a few people know about this. These tombs date back to the time of the Old Kingdom, around 2700 to 2200 BC, so yeah, they're a touch old. The 5 tombs were found northeast of the Pyramid of Menir, a 6th dynasty structure. Now these tombs clearly belonged to a group of people with high value. They were obviously officials. Mustafa al-Waziri, head of Egypt's Supreme Antiquities Council, has since released additional information on who the tombs belong to. How fun is that? That's how fast we're getting to the bottom of this already. This happened like yesterday and we already know who's in the tombs? Okay, great work. The first one belonged to an ancient official named Iri. There's a deep burial shaft that leads down to a chamber filled with funerary decorations, offering tables, the 7 oils. It looked completely untouched. Well, it was. And of course there was also a limestone sarcophagus. Can't have a tomb without a sarcophagus or two. Number 9, Queen Nefertiti. Just over a year ago, the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities announced the discovery of Queen Nefertiti, the wife of one King Teti. Yeah, here we go, aka the first pharaoh of Egypt's 6th dynasty. They found her burial shaft. There were coffins, of course mummies, artifacts, all dating back to the New Kingdom, meaning the Saqqara necropolis was used in the late period, but now apparently it was also used in the New Kingdom as well. That's the news to us. Perhaps the most questionable find was a 4-meter long scroll. That was the 17th chapter of the Book of the Dead. Yeah, nothing like finding a chapter of your favorite book. You're like, where's the rest? Let's find them. It's like a National Treasure movie, only haunting. As well as funerary masks, miniature boats, and 50 coffins. A lot of coffins in this one. Again, this is the first time 3,000-year-old coffins were found in the Saqqara necropolis. This is huge. Number 8, mummified lion cub. Back in 2019, Secrets of the Saqqara Tomb was released, and honestly, what a weekend that was. That was a good time. I remember that one. If you haven't checked it out, I implore you to do so. Officials discovered a 4,400-year-old tomb that belonged to a man named Wache at the Saqqara necropolis. This was pretty close to Cairo, only 30 kilometers away, so you can only imagine this commute ages ago and how beautiful it must have been. This tomb was full of incredible artifacts, mummified animals even. There was a lion cub and over 3,000 ancient artifacts. A lot of stuff, jam-packed this one. When digging up our past, it's tricky because you don't want to ruin any funerary decorations and anything like that and be disrespectful, but you also want to know who these people were. We want to know about our history, what happened, what they stood for before their passing, and why they were so important in the first place. Wache and his family remains were studied, and it appears malaria claimed the lives of him and his entire family. This is also the first mummified cub we've ever found in history, so as far as findings go, this one was jam-packed with history. Number 7. King Tut's artifacts. The new Grand Egyptian Museum was set to open in 2018, and then finally it did come 2021. And while that's quite recent, the contents displayed inside certainly are not. For the first time in history, King Tut's ancient belongings, all of them, all the artifacts discovered with him, will be on display. See, prior to this museum being open, we only saw around 150 artifacts from his tomb. They all took pieces on tour, a big Egyptian mummy tour, you know. It was like Kiss's final reunion tour, then also King Tut's. You're like, oh, who do I see? Ooh. But now this museum, this grand museum, will house thousands of artifacts. That's over 7,000 square meters as well, might I add. What a display this is. If you have a chance to visit the Grand Egyptian Museum, or if you saw this King Tut World Tour, I'm jealous. I'm very jealous. We have one museum in Toronto, but it's, you know. The Egypt section there is... Number 6. Engraved warnings. It's a part 3, so of course we have to include some Paris catacomb creepiness. Yeah, as far as the old tombs go, that one's pretty haunting, I'd say, no? These catacombs date back to the late 1700s. Not so ancient, but give me a break, okay? It's part 3, I'm doing my best. When the city's cemeteries were starting to fill up, and I mean that in a literal sense, officials began moving contents from all over to these abandoned mines. The catacombs were opened officially in 1809. What a fun family excursion that must have been. Nice. That or the Wax Museum. They're like, let's take the kids this way, let's go this way. They designed the catacombs with the walls of skulls to ensure that visitors would meditate on death. That's the whole vibe. Let's go meditate and think about death for a bit in the walls of skulls. Yeah, I'm sure everybody who visits thinks of nothing else. Pretty confident there. In order to ensure this was the vibe of the room, there's a phrase carved above the entrance, and it translates to, "Stop, this is the empire of the dead." I would be like, okay, no problem. Number 5. Necklace from Egyptian afterlife. We're all curious what happens after you die, right? But nobody celebrates the end of your days like the ancient Egyptians. They go hard. They really go for it. Like I mentioned earlier, they would paint doors, leave valuables. Any new tomb we discover has thousands of artifacts, hints rather to what lies beyond. An ancient necropolis was discovered only a few years ago in, of course, Egypt, and it contains dozens of coffins and a necklace that holds a message from the afterlife. Okay, now we're talking. This site is around 2,000 years old, and they're in the process of excavating it right now as we speak. But so far, the tombs and artifacts found belong to an ancient priestess. Nice. A message from the afterlife is pretty spectacular. We want that, we want that. Don't let Rose from Titanic near that one, or else you know what she'll do with the necklace. You know what she likes doing. Number 4. Bone compass. Okay, just because we've been talking about graves does not mean these messages or anything have to be written or drawn. Sometimes it can be as simple as leaving animal bones on the ground. Yeah, that ought to speak for itself more than any art. If you see that, you're on your way. I'm not gonna be grave robbing if there's a big old pile of bones oddly placed. What do you guys like, White Walkers, Game of Thrones? What is this? This is terrifying. In St. Augustine, for example, the remains of a donkey were found buried underground. Judging from the skull, it had been clearly hunted down by humans at the time. That's not the weird part here. The weird part is that all these bones have been carefully separated. There's no marks to suggest that any tools were used, so gross, for one, but researchers believe that this wasn't even used for food. The limbs were placed to point north and south. They used this donkey as a compass. How rude is that? Donkeys in the area of Florida in the 17th century, that's not bizarre at all. But the way these bones were laid out, something's afoot here. What's the message here? I mean, obviously besides that way's north. Is there any other message, if that? Or were people just bored back in the day? Number 3, mythical carvings. Back in 2014, a 17-year-old cemetery was discovered along the Silk Road, which are these ancient trade roads, ancient highways rather, connecting China and the Roman Empire. In the city of Kucha, now northwest China, this cemetery was found along with 10 ancient tombs, one of which was referred to as M3. All these tombs get their cool nicknames like KB55, that's pretty good. M3, short. Sounds very British. M3 sounds like a British secret agent. M3 didn't have any haunting messages this time around, but it did contain several carvings of mythical creatures. Some creatures that don't even exist. There's a white tiger of the west, the black turtle of the north, the vermilion bird of the south, so far so recognizable, and then there's the azure dragon of the east. Could this mean that dragons are very real? Were very real? Are? I vote R. Please be real. These mythical carvings represent different seasons in the heavens, but what could the other 6 carvings even mean? Maybe the depictions of hell? Number 2, chalk drum. Deemed one of the most important pieces of prehistoric art, this chalk drum is 5,000 years old. It was first discovered by archaeologists in England back in 2018. It was found with the remains of 3 humans. It was featured in the World of Stonehenge exhibition. It sounds like an instrument, but really this chalk drum was used as an art piece. Almost like all of our drum sets from when we grew up. I'm like, oh, we don't actually play that, it's just for show. Yeah, I can't do anything on it. That guitar too, can't play that, just for show. Maybe time of your life if you're lucky, on a good day, but for the most part, for show. British Museum project curator recalls the findings as remarkable, of course. This was the artistic language throughout the British Isles 5,000 years ago. Radiocarbon dates back to 2890 BC, around the same time of the construction of Stonehenge. So yeah, pretty old. A chalk ball and bone pin were also found at the site, so again, pretty loaded discovery. And finally, coming in at number 1, Celtic warrior shield. This one was referred to as the most important British Celtic art object of the millennium, which not a bad title at all. An Iron Age chariot burial was discovered in Yorkshire a few years ago, and researchers were excavating a house development originally in Pocklington, and then they find a soldier's tomb. Nice. Also, what's the asking price? The soldier was laid on a chariot with a Celtic shield over top. The shield was dated back to 175 BC. See, most Iron Age shields up until this point didn't have scalloped edges, but this one did. Yeah, we thought metal shields were used only for ceremonies, but this one has been repaired. There are clear sword marks. It had been used many a times in battles. My arm gets tired in class if I raise it for too long, you know? I have to like do the old switcheroo or like hold it up, one of these. This guy was holding a metal shield up all day long. Are you kidding me? I'm gonna go do 1,000 push-ups now and fix that light that I moved when I did that hand bit. Kicking off our list at number 10, Israel Cursed Tomb. Here we go, right off the hop. A secret tomb was discovered in Israel only a month ago. Now this is the first time a tomb has been found at the UNESCO World Heritage Site in 65 years. Now the actual cave itself was discovered only a year ago, but these smaller chambers are being found recently, as like a month ago recently. And the tomb found came along with a message. Awesome, we love those. It vows to curse anybody who would open the grave, and this message is also written in blood red, so yeah. Can we not open this one, maybe? Last time we had a black sarcophagus in Egypt, people were sticking their heads in for no reason, just to see what's up. And then, you know, a plague happened. So, number 9, Polish king curse. Some of you may remember this, or your parents might so ask them about this at dinner. Yeah, make it weird tonight. Ask them about a Polish king curse tonight while you're eating food. Back in 1973, a team of archaeologists were jazzed when they uncovered an ancient 15th century tomb. The tomb of the Polish king at the time, King Casimir IV Jagiellon. Now media was of course all over this discovery, as they should be, it was exciting. Now everyone was of course making jokes about a curse. You kinda have to, right? We're all thinking about it. What if there's a curse? I don't know. open it though, still. Some team members involved ended up dying after the discovery. It was a little odd. There were a few who said it was due to a curse, but the sudden illnesses were in fact caused by deadly fungi inside the tomb. So it still was the tomb's fault, but it wasn't a curse per se. It was breathed in, and that's what led to these researchers' untimely death. Number 8. King Tut's curse. Here we go. Since we're on the topic of illnesses or curses, let's go back 50 more years, shall we? To the legendary discovery of King Tut's tomb in 1922. This discovery is what made everyone, so paranoid when that Polish king curse came out, right? This discovery and what followed is the main reason we believe in mummy curses today. One member of the expedition, George Herbert, passed away suddenly 6 weeks after they opened King Tut's chamber. It was not toxic mold, it wasn't a curse, but rather it was a mosquito bite on the cheek. He got blood poisoning from a mosquito bite, that's all it was. I mean, I'm sure digging up bodies from the past and opening the tombs up doesn't help karma in general, but it wasn't a curse written in red. Not this time. Number 7. A strange resting place. Ancient burial grounds. Okay, these tombs, they come in many different shapes and sizes. Some can be these massive Great Pyramids, and others can be a shallow cave system. Sometimes there's ancient history right below your feet, and you'd never know. In St. Augustine, for example, the remains of a donkey were found buried underground. And judging from the skull and the bones and the placement, something was afoot here. It had clearly been hunted down by humans and placed there purposefully. That's not the mysterious part at all. The mysterious part is that all the bones have been carefully separated and there's no marks to suggest that any tools were used. So researchers believe that this thing wasn't even used for food. So what was it? The limbs were placed to point north and south. That's it. They used this donkey as a compass. How rude is that? What? Donkeys in that area of Florida in the 17th century, that's not bizarre at all. But the way the bones were buried, north and south, that's very odd. That's very Game of Thronesy. You know what I'm saying? What's the message here? What's the point? What's the point? Besides north and south, of course. Number 6. Tortoise Tomb. Okay, somebody called Mario. We got a lot of shells to explain. Okay, pal? Back in 2005 in northern Israel, a tomb of a shaman, who we believe was a 45-year-old woman at the time of her passing, was found in a cave. It was a cave/tomb. Like I said, many different shapes and sizes. There were 28 other skeletons as well, and it appears they had a 6-stage burial. There were beautiful decorations to suggest such, but something that really stood out here were the 86 tortoise bodies discovered in the corner of the tomb. What was going on here? What did we miss? I have FOMO, but I'm not sure why. Was this an ancient feast or a long-lost sacrifice? Either way, poor guys. Number 5. The Sitting Man. Okay, of all the tombs to find, this one would be the most horrifying. This would be so jarring to stumble across, okay? Buckle up. Back in 2005, researchers found a Mayan tomb in Honduras from the 5th century, okay? It's a long time ago. And the body inside was not lying down. It wasn't a pile of bones pointing east or west this time. Rather, it was in a chair, sitting up, like a villain from Zelda. How scary would that be? I mean, it's beautiful, but that's jarring to stumble across. You know what I mean? Whoever was the first person to look and see that, brave soul, that's all I'm saying. The body found, it appears to be an elite member of the Mayan Empire. He passed away, we think, around 650 AD. Yeah, the guy gets propped up in a chair. That's awesome. His legs were crossed and he was rocking jade jewelry. This was very royal. And the tomb itself was actually upright as well. It's common fear to be buried alive, but in this case, you'd have plenty of room. You'd be like, oh, we're good. These types of tombs are actually quite rare to find, but the fact that this one is also in great condition and there's somebody sitting cross-legged inside, double rare. There we go. Number 4. The Terracotta Army. This is, talk about curses. Oh boy. The tomb of Emperor Qi Shi Huang, China's first emperor. Okay, in this tomb, we can find 8,000 statues. This one is quite loaded. I almost made this number 1 just out of principle. But they all have unique carvings on their face, as if to suggest these are all custom statues, all representing an individual from that long ago. All 8,000 of them. The emperor believed that after he had passed away, he would have the spirits of his enemies to face, so he wanted to be prepared even after death. The emperor decided to close the tomb before the workers even had a chance to get out. It was horrible. He was worried his enemies had found out, so there's of course lots of statues down there and a lot of dark history, just all piled into one. I would never go near this. I think the Mummy 3 is about this tomb. It didn't do so well, but yeah. Scary concept. Number 3. Message from Egyptian afterlife. We're all curious what happens after you die, of course, but nobody celebrated the end of your days like ancient Egyptians did, right? It's beautiful. Like I've mentioned before on this channel, they would have these fake painted doors. They would leave valuables. Any new tomb that we discover provides more hints as to what lies beyond, right? An ancient necropolis was discovered only a few years ago, again in Egypt. It contains dozens of coffins and a necklace that holds a message from the afterlife. Okay, now we're talking. This site is around 2,000 years old, and they're in the process of excavating it as we speak, as I mansplain to you about these tombs. But so far the tombs and artifacts found, officials think, belong to an ancient priestess. A message from the afterlife is pretty spectacular, but what does it say exactly? Well, we're still waiting to find out. These things take time, you know? Number 2, mythical carvings. Back in 2014, a 1700-year-old cemetery was discovered along the Silk Road, which are these ancient ancient highways rather, connecting China and the Roman Empire. Now in the city of Kucha, now in northwest China, the cemetery was found along with 10 ancient tombs, one of which was referred to as M3. M3 didn't have any haunting messages this time around, but it did contain several carvings of mythical creatures. Creatures that were once alive? Question mark. There's the white tiger of the west, the black turtle of the north, the vermilion bird of the south, so far so lovely, and then there's the azure dragon of the east, a little bigger, a little bit more mighty. These mythical carvings represent different seasons and the heavens, but could the other 6 carvings mean depictions of hell? Probably, possibly. And finally, number 1, the Ring of Sekenianis. One ring to rule them all. And by rule, I mean curse you and your entire family. Don't touch this. This is why you don't steal from ancient tombs. Has to be number 1. This 12-gram gold ring, for starters, looks beautiful. And secondly, it's massive. Its diameter was 25 millimeters, so unless you were wearing some sort of infinity gauntlet, she's probably gonna fall off your little Jack Skellington fingers, you know what I mean? The ring had first been found in 1785. A farmer was plowing a field in Silchester Village, a village west of London known for its grim history, because in 45 AD, ancient Romans invaded that site, and come the 7th century, it was completely abandoned. And probably pretty cursed. The ring was mighty and even had an inscription on it, a Latin inscription, of course. It read, Senequian vivas Indium. And when 1929 rolled around, new details surfaced, or resurfaced rather. The data from the ring matched an excavation that was done in the early 1900s less than 100 miles away, in a place called Lydney. That's where this ring is from. At the same site, however, a tablet was found recalling the Celtic god of healing and hunting, and how his favorite ring got stolen. I'm connecting some stories here. Uh-oh, I may have stolen something I shouldn't have. If this rings a bell, yes, Lord of the Rings was inspired by this exact legend. The tablet also says, may he who bears the name of Senequianus not have health until he brings the ring back to the Temple of Nodens. Yeah, let's get that ring back ASAP Rocky. That would be great. I'll be a lot quicker than Lord of the Rings. I'll be a lot quicker than 3 movies. I'll tell you that. Where's this temple? I'll put it in my Uber right now. I'm on my way. Kicking off the list at number 10, Ramses II. Ramses II, part 2, you see what I'm doing here. He's considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest pharaoh of the 19th dynasty. Ramses II is still considered the ruler of rulers. It's not a bad title, not bad at all. In year 30 of his reign, Ramses II was ritually transformed into an Egyptian god. Not bad, I'm turning 30 in a few years. I hope someone turns me into a god. Or gets me like a bike, one of the two, I'll take both. So it was only fair if the spoiled pharaoh erected a bunch of statues of himself. Yeah, big selfies. Ramses put up more selfies than any other pharaoh in history. Most famous of them, the temples of Abu Simbel. There lies a monument dedicated to the late Queen Nefertiti and the Ramesseum. We kicked off a part 1 with Ramses signing the first ever peace treaty, so for part 2 we had to show some of the glamour side of him, you know? Number 9, over 100 children. Who is this guy, Nick Cannon? Ramses II is the father to over 100 children. With that, of course, came the 200 wives, otherwise ow and how, if it was just one person, ow and how, you know? It's guesstimated that Ramses had 96 sons and 60 daughters. Of all those children, Ramses outlived a lot of them. It's almost like living as a king helped, perhaps, maybe, I don't know, maybe you ate better. Maybe, just a hint, just an idea. Eventually, Ramses was succeeded by his 13th son with his favorite queen, Queen Nefertari, giving her the fanciest tomb in the Valley of the Queens. Nefertari's tomb contains paintings that some consider are the greatest works of ancient Egyptian art. Not bad, I had like baseball wallpaper on mine growing up. Tomb QV66, he spoiled his lady, look at this. We gotta love him. Her tomb is 520 square meters covered in beautiful art, but in 1904 when Nefertari's tomb was rediscovered, all that was found was her mummified knees. Yeah, all that was left was her kneecaps. Who does this? Raiders had stolen all the treasure prior, sometime in the many moons she had been lying there, and they even took her body and left her knees. Like, what? Monsters. They're like, yeah, grab the treasure, leave the patellas, let's do it. Number 8, ready to strike. Pharaohs may have looked beautiful living in after death, but they meant business, okay? They were protective of their land, their family, their many lovers and children. The symbol often worn by pharaohs were symbols of power, a Nemes crown. This crown was a striped headcloth and the back of their head was covered with an aureus symbol, aka an upside down cobra. The cobra symbol represents that the pharaoh is always ready and willing to attack their enemies. Attack them with venom. It's a pretty cool symbol. Mine just says DC Etnies shoes. I'm like, this says fight me if anything. DC skate shop on my back. I'm like, yeah, you can just attack me, that's cool. Number 7, King Teti. The Pyramid of Teti was built for the first ruler of the 6th dynasty. While it's not as flashy or massive as other pyramids, inside it contains the oldest writing ever in the religious world, that is. Inside it contains the pyramid texts, these legendary texts. They go all the way back to 2400 BC. The pyramid texts were specifically written so that this king, King Teti, could ascend to the heavens after his death. This isn't bizarre behavior by any means, but King Teti, he was specific. He wanted to be a star, like a literal star. There are spells and incantations that are in this tomb meant to free the king's soul as he arrives in the cosmos. More specifically for Teti to become a star in the sky and join Osiris and Orion in the #God Squad. There's even instructions on how to preserve the body and travel to these heavens. It's one thing to be buried with your gold, then you can live another life, but to become a star, I need to expand my dreams. My gosh, King Teti was onto something here. When I go, in my will, I'm gonna be like, can I become a star? Is that possible? Can I just throw me up into the heavens? Can I do that? Or bury me, that's cool. Bury me in Ajax, that works. Number 6, Yozer. For this one, we're looking into some bull worshipping. So if you're a fan of bulls, here, this one's perfect for you, weirdly enough. Just north of the step pyramid of Pharaoh Dozier, archaeologist Auguste Mariette discovered this site in 1851. The Serapeum. It's a temple dedicated to the Egyptian deity Serapis, and it's a combination of Osiris and Apis in human form. This was a large burial ground for the Apis bulls, these bulls that were said to be sacred, of course, and after their death, they would become immortal. Immortal bulls, that sounds badass. And also terrifying, that's very scary. Don't wear red around these guys. Today at Saqqara, there's a massive vault. It's 382 yards long, and it's carved out of sandstone bedrock. It's huge, and along the sides, there's 24 chambers, each with a sarcophagus carved out of a single chunk of granite. Just impossible craftsmanship all around. Especially at these times, like, oh my god, my wrists are tired just typing about this, let alone doing this. Inside these boxes were animal remains, bones and all that jazz, but back in those times, you weren't allowed to break up any bodies. You had to mummify them, right? Hence part 1 and where we are now. How are these tombs built so perfectly, weighing over 80 tons? And also, where do these bones come from? I have so many questions. Maybe on part 3 we'll answer them. Number 5, we love cats. I'm allergic to cats, but I still go for it. I still pet them. I risk everything just to, yes, I don't care. I ruined my entire weekend just to get my face all up in their whiskers. Nobody did it like ancient Egyptians. You've probably heard this at one point or another. They worshipped cats. They were like, you know, the legendary cats. That was their thing. I'm more of a golden retriever guy, but I get it, they're cute. They respected them, they worshipped them. Even though at the time, dogs were respected for being hunters, cats were still considered magical creatures. It's because they just stare at shit randomly. Mid-conversation, a cat will just be like, no, they're not magical, they're terrifying. They're on something. If you had a cat, you had good luck, apparently. A friend of mine has 2 fat cats. He has some pretty good luck, I think. If they're fat, they're good? When a cat passed away back in ancient Egyptian times, they too were mummified. You would think that alone was just plenty of respect, but ancient Egyptians and pharaohs, they would obviously go a step further. Hence this fun list. After their cat died, they would shave their eyebrows off and would mourn them until they grew back. That's like 3.5 months of cat depression. That's wild. I got over my childhood animal in like 6 business days. It's not a bad thing, it's just that's a long time, you know? Next time your friend tells you their cat passed away, tell them if they really love them, they would shave their eyebrows. Test them. Number 4, ancient Photoshop. When we look back at ancient artwork, we see these kings and queens, well, all the pharaohs were considered kings, but it was equal at the time. And they all look athletic. They all look like these warriors, right? They look to be in great shape. When in reality, a lot of these pharaohs were probably pretty overweight or unhealthy. I mean, think about it. If you slam wine and bread all day, plus a little dab of honey every 8 minutes, you're gonna gain some weight. Yeah, that's how it goes. Many of these ancient pharaohs did have diabetes, and Queen Hatshepsut, who was alive during the 15th century BC, her sarcophagus shows her as slim and strong and all that jazz, but almost all historians agree that she was out of shape and quite unhealthy. Honestly, fair, I would do the exact same thing. She was ahead of her time. If somebody was like, hey, I'm gonna make a statue for you, what should I make it look like? I'm like, Yeah, give him an 8-pack, make him jacked, I don't know. Make him look like Michael Jordan, I don't know. Number 3, gender reveal parties. Okay, we've seen all these videos online. A guy goes to swing and hit a baseball, he misses, it hits the ground. There's a big pink cloud of smoke, everyone's like, oh my god. Gender reveal parties, right? They're pretty popular. Turns out they're popular back in ancient Egyptian days, but nobody did it like them. Also, nobody started any wildfires back then when any ancient Egyptians did it, so that's nice. We should go take a note from them. Back in the day, Egyptians had a pretty interesting method for predicting the gender of a newborn. You would have to use wheat and barley seeds. You would have to pee on them, and then however it grew, that would determine the sex. I would feel bad. First of all, I'd be like, hi, we're curious, don't mind us. Just gonna pee on your crop, sir. Let us know how it grows. We're aiming towards a boy this time. We have 96 girls, so we're gonna try a couple of boys. Yeah, depending on how the crops grew, they could accurately predict the sex of the child, and it worked a lot of the time. It's pretty wild. We went from watering crops to burning them down just to find out a gender. Hashtag it's a boy. Number 2, more tattoos. More tattoos for number 2. We love it. You guys saw what I did. Ancient Egyptians worshipped animals. We talked about that, the whole cat stuff and the whole hippo situation in part 1, that was violent. But what about baboons? Did they get any love? Baboons, I say it weird, baboons, baboons. They were pretty important pieces to this ancient Egyptian puzzle. Some mummies were found with tattoos of baboons on their bodies. One of the most strange things pharaohs did back in ancient Egyptian days was train baboons to make arrests. Yep, stop resisting, you're going to jail. Me and 7 baboons, let's carry them into the car, bam. Imagine stealing food for your family just to like try and get by, and then 4 baboons pop out, start doing parkour, and then arrest you in front of everyone. That'd be so embarrassing and also alarming. They trained baboons to pick fruit, make beer, and even entertain. Yeah, these baboons were the life of the party, apparently. If their dance moves alone would be reason enough to get a tattoo on one of my arms, honestly. Going all crazy, throwing their own at people, I'd be like, yeah, right here, or here, I don't care. And finally, number 1, the afterlife. One of the most fascinating parts about these ancient Egyptian pharaohs is that they would pass away literally covered in gold, head to toe. It's nice to know that this long ago, some of these kings and queens still rest untouched by grave robbers or explorers. The afterlife for these pharaohs was important. And as soon as they take on the throne, work is immediately underway on their tomb. That's a little grim when you think about it. It's like, hey, congratulations, we're gonna start making where you're gonna be buried. It's like, thanks, I think. These monuments took time, but they were built to last, and clearly they have. Pharaoh's eyes were painted black with coal. They did this so that they would look like the god Horus after they passed on.